Publication of the Forest Cessation of Forest Reserve Instrument 2022 EI 144. There have been reports circulating in sections of the public that the Achimota Forest Reserve, as currently constituted, has been sold and is set to be earmarked and redeveloped into residential enclave. The general public is entreated to disregard these reports as they are false, baseless, and non-factual. Indeed, what the propagators of these messages have refused to add is that EI 144 was published together with the Forest Achimota Firewood Plantation Forest Reserve Amendment Instrument 2022 EI 154, which I'll be making available to you, members of the press. So, for the avoidance of doubt, President Akufo-Addo, nor myself or his government intends to sell the Achimota Forest or redevelop the Achimota Forest as currently constituted. On the contrary, we intend to enrich the Achimota Forest, revamp it, and hopefully, in the not too distant future, transform it into the likes of Hyde Park of London and Central Park of New York, where Ghanaians can go and enjoy forest, the beauty of nature and forest reserve as it happens in other parts of the world. You will recall, and you may be aware, that the Forestry Commission, under the able leadership of Mr. John Alote, the Chief Executive Officer, have been working tirelessly to reforest the Achimota Forest Reserve. For anybody who's been to the Achimota Forest Reserve lately, you will find that the Achimota Forest Reserve is degraded largely, and we're making a lot of efforts at planting trees at the Achimota Forest Reserve. So, with all the strength I can marshal at my disposal, the Achimota Forest Reserve remains intact. What EI 144 does is to make the portions of the land acquired as far back as 1927 for a forest reserve, the portions which have not been used as a forest reserve, the portions which have been encroached upon since the acquisition in 1927, which had already been granted to the Owu family in September 2013, ceased to be a forest reserve and returned to the pre-acquisition owners. Ladies and gentlemen of the press, I think it's important that we set the historical facts in the right perspective, and it will get Ghanaians to appreciate the background to this matter. In 1921, the government of the then Gold Coast, by a certificate of title dated 16 December 1921, made under the Public Lands Ordinance 1877, acquired from the Owu family, the pre-acquisition owners, the parcel of land on which the Achimota School is situated. Subsequent by another certificate of title dated 17 May 1927, the government of Gold Coast, acquired from the same family another tract of land measuring approximately 479 hectares as an extension of the Achimota School. Although compensation was paid for the 1921 acquisition, compensation was not paid for the 1927 acquisition, which is the parcel of land which was acquired to be used as a forest reserve. So, for the avoidance of doubt, compensation was paid for the Achimota School to the owners, the Alodia owners of the land, the Owu family, but compensation was not paid for the 1927 acquisition, which was the acquisition made for purposes of a forest reserve. By order 31 of 1930, dated July 17, 1930, the government, pursuant to its powers under the Forest Act 1927, Cap 157, constituted the land acquired in 1927 as a forest reserve for the purposes of fuel wood plantation for Achimota School. So, in other words, when the acquisition was made in 1921 for the Achimota School, and a further acquisition was made in 1927, in 1930 by Order 31, the government of Gold Coast designated the 1927 acquisition as a forest reserve, and as is captured in Cap 157 to serve as fuel wood plantation for Achimota School. In other words, for them to harvest it for fuel for purposes of running the Achimota School. Since 1930, in 1961, the government of the day released portions of the land which was acquired in 1927 and which had not been used actually for a forest reserve to be used as a site for the construction of Gimpa as we know it today. So Gimpa was carved out of the 1927 acquisition. 1961, it was released for purposes of the construction of Gimpa. Indeed, the Forestry Commission headquarters land was also carved out of the 1927 acquisition for it to be used for purposes of Forestry Commission headquarters. The seismic center, which is the earthquake monitoring center, and several other installations in this 1927 acquisition were carved out of this acquisition for purposes of constructing the earthquake monitoring center and several other installations in that enclave. Ladies and gentlemen of the press, following several encroachments on the forest reserve, and by that I mean the 1927 acquisition, the pre-acquisition owners, the Owu family, in 2007 submitted a petition to the then president, His Excellency John Agyekum Kufuor, for the release of the portion of the forest reserve adjoining the Temamoto Way. After consultations between the office of the president and the relevant authorities, it was recommended that the portion of the forest reserve which was not used for the forest, the Achimota forest as currently constituted, be released to the Owu family. This culminated in an agreement dated 24th November 2008 between the government acting by the then Ministry of Lands, Forestry and Mines and the Owu family for the grant of a lease over 99 years. In 2011, the Owu family submitted another petition to the then Minister for Lands and Natural Resources, Honorable Mike Hammer, for the grant of portions of the forest acquisition which had not been used for the Achimota forest as currently constituted to the Owu family in lieu of compensation for the 1927 acquisition. The minister constituted a committee chaired by the then chairman of the then chaired by a chairman which was the then chief executive officer of the Forestry Commission, Mr. Samuel Afaredati, to inquire into the legitimacy of the request and its impact on the forest reserve as currently constituted. The committee, after its investigation, concluded that the request of the Owu family was legitimate. This is as far back as 2011. The minister then sought executive approval to implement the recommendations of the committee. Ladies and gentlemen of the press, on 5th September 2013, the then President of the Republic, His Excellency John Dramani Mahama, gave executive approval for the conversion of the forest, the part of the 1927 acquisition, which had not been used as forest reserve, to be released to the Owu family, and further granted that the forest reserve itself, that is the Achimota Forest Reserve, be converted into an ecotourism park. And this was pursuant to the recommendations of the Mr. Samuel Afaredati Committee, which is the 2011 committee. Pursuant to the said executive approval, the Forestry Commission, acting on behalf of the then President, His Excellency John Dramani Mahama, executed 3 leases in September 2013, granting portions of the forest reserve which had not been used as the Achimota Forest Reserve as currently constituted to the Owu family for a term of 99 years. The family then registered the land in its name and granted sub-leases to other private developers with the consent of the Forestry Commission. I think at this stage I should explain a little bit. So essentially what I'm seeking to point out is that the 1927 acquisition forms a bigger parcel of land. As many of you may be aware, in the colonial times and even in the first Republican dispensation, when land was acquired for a particular purpose, large tracts of land were acquired because land was available at the time. The EI which acquired Kolebu Teaching Hospital actually covers most part of Accra. So is the EI which acquired the University of Ghana, covers several parts of Accra, all the way to East Legon, North Legon, and several other enclaves of Accra. And that is the import of this 1927 acquisition. The acquisition was so large that the portion which was used for the Achimota forest, as we all know it today, forms part of the larger acquisition, part of which, as I've sought to explain, was released for the construction of Gimpa in 1961, part of which have been used for the Forestry Commission, part of which have been used for the Earthquake Monitoring Center. So the other portion of it, which has not been used as Achimota forest, as we all know it today, the old family, who had not received compensation as far back as 2008, began petitioning government after government for that portion of land which is not being used for its original purposes or its original intended purposes to be released to them in lieu of compensation. And this is what I say, that in 2011 a committee was set up. The committee said the request was legitimate, beginning from President Kufuor's government. In 2011, the committee said it was legitimate. In 2013, executive approval was given for the release of those peripheral portions of the Achimota forest. And indeed, a lease was granted. 3 leases were granted in favor of the Owu family. And those leases have been registered in the name of the Owu family. And therefore, they had acquired some legal interest or legal title in the portions of the land which had not been used as a forest reserve, as we all know and call Achimota forest. Pursuant to the same executive approval, the Owu family, let me go back. Pursuant to the same executive approval, the Forestry Commission, acting on behalf of the then President of the Republic, His Excellency John Dramani Mahama, entered into an agreement with Akan Capital, a limited liability company, for the development of the area of the forest into an ecotourism park. The Commission also executed a lease agreement with the company in February 2016, by which 227 hectares of the forest reserve was leased to the company to undertake the planned development. The Owu family and their grantees, in a bid to develop the peripheral portions of the land which had already been granted to them, continue to petition government to release the peripheral portions, which continue to be classified as a forest reserve to them. Government, after assessing the entire situation and based on the advice of the Forestry Commission, that the ecological integrity of the forest reserve, the Achimota Forest Reserve, as we all know, will not be compromised by the release, decided to release the peripheral portions of the land from the forest reserve to the Owu family. And here too, I think I have to explain. And so the 1930, Order 31 of 1930, dated July 17th, 1930, which declared the 1927 acquisition as a forest reserve. Even though the part which doesn't form Achimota forest as currently constituted has been granted to the Owu family, leases have been granted to them. They have subsequently also granted sub-leases to third parties. Because that portion of land continue to be classified under the 1930 promulgation as a forest reserve, until and unless that executive instrument is amended, those peripheral portions cannot vest absolute title in the Owu family. And so that is what EI 144 sought to do. And with your permission, I would like to delve into EI 144. So EI 144, which is the EI which has been circulated, is titled Executive Instrument EI 144, Forest, Cessation of Forest Reserve Instrument 2022. Paragraph 1 states, Cessation of Forest Reserve. The land specified in the schedule to this instrument shall cease to be a forest reserve on the first day of May 2022. So what paragraph 1 seeks to do is that the portion of land which is not being used as a forest reserve and which is not the Achimota forest as we all know it, ceases to be a forest reserve, so that the Owu family, who were granted leases in 2013 and who had registered the lease in their name, can have legal title to those portions of land which were granted to them in 2013. So in actual fact, in substance, in practice, by all intents and purposes, the Owu family had acquired some legal interest in this portion of land as far back as 2013. It was just so that the 1930 instrument would be amended to declassify that portion as a forest reserve. And because we wanted to protect our Achimota forest, Ghana's Achimota forest, the government of Ghana and President Akufo-Addo's government insisted on paragraph 3 of EI 144 and said, it's titled, Protection of the Ecological Integrity of an Adjoining Forest Reserve. And the paragraph 3 reads, and with your permission, see 3.1 says, despite paragraph 1, which is the paragraph I just spoken to, a person shall not A, take possession of, or B, carry out any physical development on the land specified in the schedule, which is the land which is not part of Achimota forest properly so called, or the land which has been granted to the old family, without the prior approval of the minister, in this case the Minister for Lands and Natural Resources, acting on the recommendation of the Forestry Commission. And 2, the minister shall not approve any development on the land specified in the schedule unless the minister is satisfied that the development A is in accordance with the master plan developed by the District Land Use and Spatial Planning Authority and approved by the minister, and B does not adversely affect the ecological integrity of an adjoining forest reserve. In other words, even whilst we are granting them this land, which doesn't form part of Achimota forest properly so called or currently constituted, we put in this clause just so that the development of this peripheral land does not compromise the Achimota forest. So we don't wake up one day and we find development in Achimota forest. That is why we insisted on putting this clause in EI 144. And I'm happy to divulge this. It took a lot of negotiations and a lot of back and forth, but we insisted that this clause 3, paragraph 3, be inserted in EI 144 so that the Achimota forest is protected. We didn't end there. Once you amended the 1930 instrument, which is the July 17, 1930 instrument, once you amended it, by legal implication, the part of the 1930 or 1927 acquisition, which does not form part of the schedule of EI 144, automatically continue to be a forest reserve. So in actual fact, you don't need any further legislation or promulgation for the other part which doesn't form the schedule of EI 144 to continue to be a forest reserve. But we went a step further to promulgate another EI on the back of EI 144. Strangely, that EI was concealed, and I'm putting it out today. The EI is titled Executive Instrument EI 154, Forest Achimota Firewood Plantation Forest Reserve Amendment Instrument 2022. That's the Achimota Forest Instrument EI 154, Forest Achimota Firewood Plantation Forest Reserve Amendment Instrument 2022. And with your permission, with your kind permission, I think it will serve the country a lot of good for the purposes of transparency for me to read this EI 154 verbatim. It's not so long. Whereas under Section 2 of the Forest Act 1927, Cap 157, the President may constitute an area of land as a forest reserve. Whereas under the Forest Achimota Firewood Plantation Forest Reserve Order 1930, Order number 31 of 1930, issued pursuant to Section 2 of the Forest Act 1927, Cap 157, the government constituted a parcel of land containing an approximate area of 1,000 acres or 479 hectares as a forest reserve. Whereas following a petition submitted to the office of the President, the then President John Dramani Mahama on 5th September 2013 gave executive approval for the conversion of a portion of the forest reserve into an ecotourism facility and the release of the peripheral portions of the forest reserve which have been adversely impacted by human activities to the old family, the owners of the land before the acquisition of the land for use as a forest reserve. Whereas the President of the Republic is satisfied that the remaining portion of the land specified in the schedule should remain as a forest reserve, and whereas the President of the Republic is satisfied that the ecological integrity of the land specified in the schedule should be protected. Now, therefore, in exercise of the power conferred on the President by Section 2 of the Forest Act 1927, Cap 157, this instrument is made this 21st day of April 2022. Title: Declaration of Land Remaining as Forest Reserve. Paragraph 1. The land specified in the schedule to this instrument is declared to remain as a forest reserve, as Achimota Forest. Protection of the ecological integrity of land remaining as forest reserve. 2. Paragraph 2. A person shall not carry out any physical development on any adjoining land that is likely to adversely affect the ecological integrity of the land specified in the schedule. Signed, Samuel Abdullahi Tinapa, Minister for Lands and Natural Resources. So EI 154, we went a step further for the avoidance of doubt to reaffirm that the Achimota forest remains a forest reserve. Ladies and gentlemen of the press, if you take a look at the requests I made of the President of the Republic for an executive instrument, I did indicate in the final paragraph, in order to motivate the discretion of the president to give approval for us to proceed as we've done, I did indicate, and I quote, the ministry intends to develop the forest into an ecotourism park along the likes of Central Park in New York or Hyde Park in London, end quote. So by all intents and purposes, ab initio, we always intended to rather upgrade the Achimota forest into a forest reserve which is fit for purpose, which is befitting of Accra as the capital of our country. Achimota forest has not been sold, it's not been compromised, it will not be sold, it remains as it is. We will continue to reforest the Achimota forest, and God willing, we intend to develop the Achimota forest into a true forest reserve which will serve Accra and the people of Ghana. I thank you for your attention. I'm happy to take it.